Hey everyone, as we have folks starting to trickle in, thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Ryan Andrews. I'm one of the co-chairs for the DSA National Labor Commission. I'm also a rank and file member of United Teachers Los Angeles. I'm very thrilled to have all of our panelists and attendees on the call today. We'll give folks just a couple minutes to join, and then I will introduce our MC for the night. Abdullah is putting a sign-in form in the chat. Please go ahead and start signing that sign-in form so that we can start getting the information for people who want to continue pushing for a permanent ceasefire, for an arms embargo, and all the work that we're going to be doing ahead of the DNC. All right, we have almost cracked 100 participants. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Once again, my name is Ryan Andrews. I use he, him pronouns. I'm one of the co-chairs for the DSA National Labor Commission, also a rank and file member of United Teachers Los Angeles. So honored to be here with some really inspiring panelists, friends and mentors of mine who are fighting for Palestinian liberation, for a free Palestine. We are going to get started in just a minute or so. And once again, thank you so much for being here. And I will introduce our MC in just one moment. Okay, I think we are about at our peak for the beginning of this call. With attendance, we've cracked 100 people. So thank you so much to everybody who is joining us for this important call tonight. Once again, my name is Ryan Andrews. I'm one of the co-chairs for the DSA National Labor Commission. Use he, him pronouns. I'm also a rank and file member of United Teachers Los Angeles. And I'm just so thrilled to have everybody here on the call tonight, our panelists and all of our attendees. Abdullah is putting a sign-in link in the chat. Please do sign in. This is not an informational call. This is a call to action. And so we do want everybody to participate and to make good on these asks that you'll hear throughout the call tonight. With that being said, I will turn it over to our wonderful MC for the evening, Alexis Zaidan, from the Uncommitted National Movement and the campaign director for Not Another Bomb. So I will turn it over to Lexis, and she will introduce each of our panelists. Thank you so much, Lexis.
Thank you, Ryan. Hey, everybody. So excited to be on this call with you all tonight. Fun update. I'm actually coming to you live from Chicago at our Uncommitted headquarters, where we have spent the last couple of days just preparing for the whirlwind that we are about in the journey we're about to embark upon as we, go into the DNC and hopefully continue to pressure our administration to, one, uplift Palestinian human rights, and also Palestinian self-determination by pressuring our administration to stop U.S. funding of weapons to Israel's killing and occupation of Palestinians. And so just really grateful to be on this call. Just a little context on who I am. As Ryan said, I'm with the Uncommitted National Movement and director of the Not Another Bomb campaign, but actually started with Abbas and Layla and a few others in Michigan, where the Uncommitted movement started and had gotten over 101,000 uncommitted votes. I am a first-generation Palestinian American, and I do have family in both occupied West Bank and Jerusalem. And as you all can imagine, this is a very important, topic of discussion for me, my family, not just because I'm Palestinian, but also because I'm human. And I used to be a teacher, so people, I find that resonation and that connection with a lot of folks on this call. And fun fact about me being a teacher, I actually worked in a school district where unions were not allowed. And when a few of us tried to coordinate and create unions, our jobs were potentially at risk for being fired for doing that. And so I'm just so incredibly grateful for the work that a lot of the labor unions have done with the ceasefire statement that 7 of our major unions have been able to sign on to, and just all of the organizing across different spaces in the country. I'm incredibly grateful for the work that we're doing, because I don't think this is work that we could do alone. And so for folks that don't know, I just kind of want to give a quick background on the most recent campaign we launched, which is the Not Another Bomb campaign. It's essentially Uncommitted's second effort as a way to pressure the administration to get to a lasting and permanent ceasefire via an arms embargo, where we're asking them to stop the U.S. funding of weapons to Israel's occupation and killing of Palestinians, especially, obviously Palestinians in Gaza, but, all over in West Bank, Rafah, all the areas that have been impacted. And the way we did that is by launching this campaign, Not Another Bomb, a couple weeks ago, where we have two ultimate demands or two actions that people can take in the movement to help, build American public pressure to convince and persuade both the Biden-Harris administration, but also the Harris-Walz campaign to listen to the American people when they say not another bomb, to ultimately raise this moral imperative that we need to save Palestinian lives right now, but also recognize that there's an electoral imperative to save our democracy come November. And so, we have an amazing mobilization distributed organizing team that has been really kicking butt over the last several weeks. And this weekend, we had our national weekend of action, where there was literally almost every state across the country hosted a action in one of their cities, literally demanding that no more of our tax dollars fund another bomb with this administration. Essentially, free Palestine, arms embargo now. We need to save Palestinian lives right now. So we've been very, very hard at work. And what we're trying to continue to do is we're trying to continue to get people behind our rallying cry, both, again, outside of the DNC, but also inside the DNC. And inside the DNC, we're able to do that in two different ways. One, with our uncommitted delegates, who will be inside the DNC with very much branding and marketing of our Not Another Bomb and our uncommitted swag, essentially being able to identify or people being able to identify them as folks that are with the uncommitted movement, who are there to, again, uplift Palestinian voices, Palestinian human rights, Palestinian self-determination. Sorry, there's a train in the background. And then the other way that we plan to influence conversation inside the convention is by recruiting ceasefire delegates. And what ceasefire delegates are is, with VP Harris becoming the new presumptive Democratic nominee, we understand, one, that it's an opportunity for us to re-engage with a new candidate to essentially turn the page on Gaza policy and create an opportunity to have healthy discourse to ultimately lead to better conversation around Palestinian self-determination and, again, getting to a ceasefire. And so one of the ways that we're able to do that is getting ceasefire delegates who are here to endorse VP Harris, but also stand in solidarity with our movement with trying to get to an arms embargo through a petition. And also they get some swag, some branding. We have ceasefire delegate shirts, we have ceasefire delegate pins. And so really trying to get that word out there that if folks are here who are who's a Harris delegate and they stand in solidarity with Palestine, with the uncommitted movement and the work that we're doing, really trying to elevate those voices in that space too. One quick last thing before I introduce you to the amazing lineup of speakers who you're all here to listen to. We actually got amazing news today that we just shared, where for the first time in history, there will be a panel as part of the Democratic National Convention programming, where we will have a panel discussing Palestinian human rights within the Democratic Party. That's never happened before. One of our leaders, Leila Al-Abed, will actually be on this panel, and it'll be moderated by Jim Zogby and Keith Ellison. And there will be also Hala Hijazi, who is a Palestinian elected, as well as Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan, who is a pediatric intensive care doctor that has actually operated on men, women, and children in Gaza who have been directly impacted by our U.S. policy because of the funding and the weaponry that we have been sending to Israel. And so we've been doing a lot of work here, but we have not been doing this work alone, obviously, alongside each of you. Our movement is what it is because of people on the ground. And, I'm so incredibly grateful for that. I'll end my little narrative by just saying, I've said this in a couple of spaces, that I've found myself a lot lately as a Palestinian telling people thank you for just speaking up on behalf of the humanity of my people. And I haven't been able to really interpret what that means to say thank you to folks for just recognizing the humanity of my people and making sure that our US dollars are not funding the genocide of Palestinians. But for what it's worth, I'm just wanted to extend gratitude to everybody on this call for organizing and for holding your space down in regards to that. But I'm very honored to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker's name is Gloria Martinez, who's the UTLA treasurer, and Gloria will be talking about speaking on the NEA call for a mutual ceasefire and talk a little bit about rank and file things that have been happening within UTLA. So I will pass the mic over to Gloria.
Thank you, Lexis. And no, okay, it says I'm muted, but I'm not muted, right? I don't see. Okay. I just want to thank the organizers of this call. I really appreciate making space for this conversation. And I'm really excited to hear about that panel at the DNC, which I think, you know, is hopefully a right step for Dems and realizing what the call is for so many people that are, you know, going to be there in Chicago. So excited to hear about that. So I just wanted to say hi and, you know, come in and say a few things. Obviously, as an educator, a budget, you know, a federal budget that prioritizes bombs over education is something that is going to have a deep impact on not only myself as an educator, but for our students and communities that we serve. As Lexis said, I'm the treasurer of UTLA, but I'm also here as an individual. And as you know, as someone who is considering who I'm going to vote for in November, I'm really excited about some of the things that can happen in Chicago in the next few days. So, you know, I just wanted to say, you know, UTLA is a diverse union. We are large. We're at 38,000 members with various opinions and serve, you know, we serve a variety of folks, constituents, but also beliefs. And we believe that our classrooms are important spaces for us to maintain autonomy, not only for educators, but really for our students to be able to speak up as well and share some of their concerns, and for educators to have the free right and will to be able to, you know, to be able to have those conversations in their classrooms in a safe space by teaching truth, by being able to make sure that our students are questions are answered, but also we are building minds that are questioning, you know, where our money goes as a government, where our money goes as a country, and what exactly it is that we're funding. As Alexis mentioned, the NEA, which is our National Educators Association, they called for a mutual ceasefire, and it's still up on their website. You know, they have mentioned as the NEA is the largest educators union in the country. I think it's a very important step that President Becky Pringle made a statement against the atrocities of this war, but also that, you know, worked with Cori Bush in helping support the resolution that she introduced, and calling for a mutual ceasefire, right? Where people are humanized, people are seen, but also that it, you know, calls to make sure that that the hostages are returned and that the victims, especially the children, right, who make up nearly half of the Gaza population, as educators, it's important for us to make those types of statements. So I was very excited to hear the NEA board, but also President Pringle's statement on this issue. It is a tough issue to talk about. As I said, you know, within UTLA, we're 38,000 members, and there's a lot of strong feelings on both sides of this issue, or no sides of this issue, unfortunately. But I think one of the things I think is really important for us to remember is how vital it is for educators to have the right to teach in their classrooms and to be able to speak truth to power. As you all know, education is constantly under attack, right? We've seen in some states where they're trying to ban books. We've seen in some states and in some districts where they're trying to censor the discussions and the teachings that happen in our classroom. And as an educators union, there is no way that we can stand for that, right? I just want to, you know, briefly touch on some of the things that UTLA has been doing overall well, that I think are much better alternatives to funding bombs and to funding wars. I think I heard something this morning that said that the US is involved. There are currently 55 conflicts across the world, right? It's not just Ukraine, it's not just Gaza, but there's like 55 conflicts that we are actively participating in one way or another. And what that means is that budgets are prioritized in a way that does not prioritize working families. As an educator and as someone who serves a population in Los Angeles that is, we have the highest homelessness rate in the country. About 90% of our students are, or 80% of our students, I think, are meet the poverty line and qualify for free and reduced lunch. And when I hear that we are funding wars, when I hear that we are supplying bombs, to me, that equates that there is something that is not being funded. And that consistently means that the education budget is being cut, that education is being threatened, right? Right now, the Project 2025 calls for the end of the Department of Education nationally. And I think it's important for us to remember that it's working class liberation, right? We want our folks, we want our students to be in a school that is full of freedom, that allows for them to question, that allows for them to learn, and protects educators that want to foster those conversations in their classroom. And so when I hear of a call from Not Another Bomb, for us to really call for a ceasefire, but also to stop the funding for wars, then it really gives me hope to believe that there is a way that we can prioritize working families, prioritize our students and their needs. One of the things that we've been doing at UTLA is we've done over the last few years what's called bargaining for the common good, which includes community schools. Community schools is something that also NEA has been very deeply involved with. Is something, it's our vision, right? It's the educators' vision as an alternative to the privatization of the educational movement, like through the charter system. UTLA, as of lately, has also been involved in trying to somehow play a role in rectifying the housing crisis here in Los Angeles. As I mentioned, Los Angeles is one of the highest, if not the highest, homeless population in this country. And you better believe that a lot of those families are LAUSD students, right? Students that our UTLA members serve. So of course, there's never any federal funding. I don't know if ever someone who's tried to apply for a Section 8 voucher. It is nearly impossible. So again, when we hear, that the prioritization is a military budget versus funding education versus funding IDEA. For those of you who don't know, right, IDEA is how we fund our special education, classes. It's a promise that has not been met by Congress since its inception, which means that our neediest students are the most underserved students. So as NEA was making these statements, as NEA was working with the Representative Cori Bush on this House resolution, I was very excited to see the momentum that was building around this. AFT has also made a statement, and it's through rank and file members at UTLA who are also very deeply connected to this issue that have also been mobilizing at UTLA, which I think is very exciting. As an elected leader, it's weird to say because I very much consider myself still rank and file. I still see myself as a teacher, and I am a special education teacher. But I think it's very important for us to listen to rank and file, to listen to the issues that they are dealing with in the classroom. And I think this is an issue that is very hot in the classroom that people want to talk about, but it's such a delicate issue that we want it to be handled correctly, but we also want our students to be able to ask questions, but we also want our members to be protected. There's been some members who have received some backlash And, that's never okay. We want to make sure that people can speak truth to power. And we want to make sure that we are having conversations in our classroom, because if we can't have honest conversations in our classrooms, then where could we have them, right? So it's important for us to have these spaces. So I thank you all who are organizing this. I appreciate, bringing such a diverse group of folks. I know that Rafa is going to speak. We had our AFT Vice President, Julie Van Wiegel. She spoke at an event with 4811 that we were very excited to support. So those are some of the things that are happening at UTLA. And thank you, Alexis, for this opportunity.
Of course, Gloria, thank you so much. And definitely completely want to agree and emphasize, you talked a lot about under-resourced schools and what students need in our country. And I know public education is something I'm very, very passionate about, and constantly do talk about how $7.2 trillion in our US budget, a third of that goes to Department of Defense contracts, and the way that we are funding war and weapons versus how we should be funding public education systems and schools. So thank you for bringing up that direct connection. Honored to introduce our next speaker, named Carl Rosen, General President of UE United Electrical Workers, who will be sharing a little bit about National Labor Network for Ceasefire and how people can actually support and pitch in there.
Great,
Carl?
thank you. Thanks so much, Alexis, and thank you for everybody who helped put this important discussion together. The National Labor Network for Ceasefire exists to give voice to labor opposed to the U.S. policy, which has been enabling Israel to unconscionably pummel Gaza and the people who live there. It started with just a simple online petition that my union UE and UFCW Local 3000 across the state of Washington put up on the internet, just a call for any national, regional, local unions sign on to it if they wanted. Simple demand at its core was that President Biden call for an immediate ceasefire. We got that up last fall, not too long into the conflict, when it was really clear what was developing there rapidly. Very quickly, over a couple short months, we had hundreds of local labor organizations and 7 national unions, encompassing a membership of over 9 million workers. Well over half of all organized workers in the US had signed on. It got to the point eventually that the AFL-CIO had to come out with its own statement in support of a ceasefire. This was very unprecedented for something to develop this quickly, and especially for it to happen in a way that essentially was a criticism of a Democratic administration. And to see labor speaking out in this way was very, very heartening. So in the course as that was building, we decided we needed some sort of way to coordinate activity. We didn't want to form a whole new organization, so we called ourselves a network, the National Labor Network for Ceasefire. And we have sort of a steering committee of representatives of the 7 national unions. And I can tell you, I think we're about to add an 8th and maybe a 9th to that body, although many other unions have signed on for ceasefire, but to be part of the coordination, and a few large locals around the country that meet on a bi-weekly basis to try to coordinate activities. And so under the NLNC banner, unions have built up a website with information and resources. We ran a national webinar to educate union members. You can see that on the website. We focus not only on what's happening in the conflict, but why labor should intercede. We, of course, many of our unions have taken part in protests, various press events. We've issued public letters to the White House. We've met directly with government officials, including national presidents of these unions. We've done membership education in our unions. We've passed resolutions at conventions. We have sponsored virtual meetings between U.S. and Palestinian trade union leaders. Very, very important for people to hear from people on the ground in their own words, and respect them as human beings who are trying to support their families the same way our members are, except now doing it under constant bombardment. We ran a very well-attended public webinar with a panel of Palestinian unionists. These things are the recording of that is still up on the website. And then and the website is in the chat. But in a really important next step development over the last several weeks, we coordinated 7 national unions, including some of the largest in the country, to jointly issue a public letter to President Biden demanding that he cut off military aid to Israel as the only way to force the Netanyahu government to agree to a ceasefire. Just saying you should do a ceasefire doesn't do it. It's clear that if we're continuing to supply the weapons, they're going to continue to use them. So the work obviously is not done. All of those things I just mentioned are things that you can be doing in your unions. But very concretely, go to the website, laborforceasefire.org, to get more information, resources, link to the webinar so you can educate members about it. If you haven't done it, sign the petition as an individual, and which also puts you on the email list, so you'll find out about other things that are going on. Start a discussion in your local union if you haven't already, to see if you can get your union to sign on as a supporter, maybe pass a resolution of their own. It's all part of membership education, which is educating the U.S. public, which is what we have to do in order to win this political fight at this point. There are ceasefire protests going on in many cities and many places. Show up there with your union shirts, your union signs, and organize a labor contingent for whatever ceasefire protests are going on, or rallies, wherever they take place. And then, of course, ask if you have any delegates within your union to the Democratic National Convention this week, as it's been mentioned. I think it'll be mentioned again. Ask them to sign on as a ceasefire delegate and make their voice heard right there at the convention. I'll close by saying, labor taking the lead on this issue is important, not only because of the direct contribution that we can make to try to end the awful assault on Palestinians that's going on, but also because it's a step on the path of labor again asserting an independent voice on U.S. foreign policy, something that has not really been done at scale in the labor movement since the 1940s. We have, as a labor movement, just completely tailed behind the two-party consensus on, spreading American power at the cost of, however many hundreds of millions of lives probably at this point across the world. And it's our obligation to not let that happen anymore. Capital largely beat that out of the labor movement in the McCarthy era, shut us up, said we can't speak on foreign policy issues, on U.S. military policy, et cetera. That's how we got to the world that we have today. That's how we got to what's happening to Palestinians right now. And we need to reverse that. And so it's heartening to see that it's underway. We've got a lot more to do, not only right now, but for many years to come. Thank you.
Carl, thank you so much for your courageous leadership and truly the work that the National Labor Network for Ceasefire has been doing. Carl beat me to the punch on one of the asks, so I'm just going to re-emphasize it in this moment of really trying to find other labor delegates and get them to sign the ceasefire delegate petition as a way to showcase, the solidarity in numbers that folks are willing to support VP Harris right now, but also folks are looking for an end to the U.S. funding of weapons to the killing and occupation of Palestinians. And so that is a really important ask in this moment as we enter into the DNC. So I just want to reemphasize that. And again, Carl, thank you for all of your words and your efforts and the leadership and everything you've been doing across the labor movement front for a ceasefire. Very honored to introduce our next guest, Rafa, who's the president of UAW 4811, who will talk about the strike from a couple of months ago and other things that have been happening, including working with National UAW to sign on to the ceasefire statement that Carl had just shared, that was put together by the National Labor Network for Ceasefire. So I will pass the mic over.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Rafael Jaime. I am a graduate student in English at the University of California, Los Angeles, and I'm also the president of UAW 4811. Just for some background, UAW 4811 is the union of 48,000 academic workers at the University of California. We are educators, researchers, the research that goes into at the University of California that brings in billions of dollars to the university system. The brunt of that work is conducted by members of my union, and the University of California essentially runs because of our work. About a couple of months ago, UAW 4811 members went on an unprecedented strike. We went on strike back in May, right after the University of California responded to protests on campus against the genocide in Palestine by sending in police using rubber bullets to suppress the protests, suppress the encampments. This was this was an unprecedented strike because unlike many of the strikes that most people are familiar with, that are often about about things like higher pay, benefits, also incredibly important fights. This strike was about the university's response to these protests, about the right to free speech, the right to protest, issues that are so fundamental to our ability to fight for everything that we do as unions. Without our ability to speak up against the boss, to speak up in the workplace, our ability to do anything really is under threat. And so when members of our own union, our students, our coworkers at the University of California began to protest against the genocide in Palestine, this was something that happens in campuses all the time. Protests are very, very common. In fact, the university campuses have been long at the forefront of the fight against the anti-war movement and the anti-war movement. But this was a very different situation at the University of California and across the country, as we saw at Columbia as well, where again protests are very common. The university just responded with an iron fist in this case. When the encampment at UCLA, the one that I'm most familiar with because that's where I myself work, this was a very peaceful encampment that got set up. It was peaceful. People were just going there, demanding that the universities end its complicity with the ongoing genocide. And the university immediately responded by, well, first of all, when there was an attack by right-wing agitators who came onto campus and attacked the encampment, the university just stood by, did absolutely nothing. It began by these agitators throwing water, pointing lasers, noisemakers, and quickly escalated to their use of fireworks that were being shot into the encampment, and then began to actually full-on attacks. People were beaten to a pulp, their skin was burned, they were maced, including many 4811 members. And the very next day, the university then sent in hundreds of riot gear police to suppress the encampment. And that's when it was then that the UAW 4011 decided that we needed to take action, that we couldn't just stand by and allow the university to beat workers and allow workers to be beaten. And so we took an unprecedented step to call for a strike authorization vote in response to this. And it passed by an overwhelming majority. It was nearly 80% of members who voted to authorize a strike. And very soon thereafter, we walked off the job, starting with Santa Cruz, moving then to UCLA and UC Davis, and then eventually to UC Irvine, UC San Diego. And this was a strike that ended up lasting about 3 weeks, almost 3 weeks. Unfortunately, it ended sooner than we wanted it to, than we were ready to end the strike, because of the university decided to, they shopped around for a right-wing judge that eventually called in for, handed down a restraining order, thereby ending the strike sooner than we were ready to end. But I think, this really, I think is an important thing to understand, that, it's really important that we engage on the political sphere as well, because the reason why the university was able to do this, why it was able to just go shop around for a judge to stop the strike, is because this was a judge that was appointed by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And if we don't engage in the political sphere and shape the political sphere, shape the courts, then we're always going to be hampered by this. we're never going to be able to fully realize our power if we can't change the system. And so, you know, I know that there are lots of right now there you know, this call is about the movement and the DNC. I know we have our members in UAW 4011 who have gone there and are ready to, or have been organizing for weeks now with other delegates to push for a movement at the DNC to hold the Democratic Party accountable and push for a ceasefire, because this is incredibly needed right now. Should have happened a long time ago, but we really need to make movement on this. And so, yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you so much for all that information and all that you are also doing as part of the president of UAW 4811. I am excited to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker's name is Tahed, who is a member of the Palestinian Youth Movement, but also a part of Communication Workers of America. Tahed will take this moment to speak primarily about why an arms embargo is needed in this moment and how labor has been involved on the front lines of being able to support an arms embargo. So I am honored to pass the Zoom mic over to Tahed.
Okay, thank you, Alexis, and thank you to the organizers of this call, and thank you for having me on to speak to a large audience of labor activists and organizers and leaders throughout the country who have been on the front lines of this fight. And I think actually the second half of what I plan to speak about has basically already been covered through the remarks given by Rafa and Carl and Gloria, and I expect others as well, because it is absolutely the case that this is kind of an unprecedented moment for labor. I mean, we've seen, you know, during the Iraq War and previous US wars, labor take a strong stand, and labor does have a history of fighting back and fighting for, as I think Carl put it, like an independent foreign policy that serves the interests of working Americans rather than serving the interests of American corporations and arms manufacturers in particular. So, and that was really kind of on display powerfully on the 23rd of last month, when 7 national unions and international ones, through the efforts of the National Network on Ceasefire and others, called for the ending of military aid to Israel. It is a strong statement at a particularly important time, and we're entering an even more important time, as has been beautifully motivated by all who have spoke, with the DNC heading. Coming next week. It's a sensitive political moment. And also, we've now passed more than 315 days of genocide on our people in Gaza, and also, as Alexis said, in all of Palestine, in the West Bank, in the 48 territories, and in fact, in the broader region, southern Lebanon, and etc. So, you know, the official toll is 40,000 martyrs as of now in Gaza. These statistics are, this is what's been agreed upon by all parties. This is probably a massive underestimate. I'm sure many have seen the Lancet report that came out a couple of weeks ago that estimated that, you know, if the war was to stop at that time, the likely death toll would climb to be 189,000 martyred Palestinians in Gaza, in addition to about 700 in the West Bank, in addition to, I saw someone in the chat discussing prisoners, like 10,000 or so prisoners in from the West Bank, and another 2,000 to 3,000 from Gaza. This is obviously, everybody knows this, but it bears repeating. This is an extremely, extremely brutal moment in a long history of such moments. And it that every day, I think we sort of awake to another massacre, another Israeli crime against humanity, war crime, and most recently the slaughter in Tabi'in school, which was being used to be it was meant to be a safe zone, but as we know, there are no such safe zones. And I think 100 or so Palestinians were martyred. This is very gruesome news, but again, just to raise the stakes of where we are, so much so that it was difficult to figure out what bodies were which after this was executed. And why is this massacre? I mean, all of these massacres are significant because all of these people are real people with lives, working people in Gaza, and et cetera. But this one, I think, relates very closely to the theme of this call because it was executed with Mk-84 bombs, which are manufactured in the United States of America and then are shipped by American manufacturers to Israel so that it can carry out its genocide of the Palestinian people. And in fact, this is not the only time that this has happened. In fact, almost every large massacre that's happened, from Al-Ma'madani early on in the war, which was sort of a tipping point, to July 8th and El Mawasi, to many others have been with these, particularly with these MK-84 bombs, but with any American weapons in general. And so for this reason, I mean, we can conclude that this is not just an Israeli genocide. This is an American Israeli genocide. And we need to come together as a labor movement, as we have, to be, to assume the sort of role that the labor movement has played often, and particularly at its proudest moments, to be a sort of bulwark and continue leading on this as we have done so. And it bears in the sort of context of this conversation, remembering that actually the Biden administration withheld arms to Israel for a period of about 2 months. They weren't shipping. I mean, they were still playing a role, of course, in supporting the Israeli war effort, but they out of a sort of claimed concern for humanitarian losses or human lives, they withheld arms for about 2 months. They then returned arms supplies, I think in early July, like the 5th or something like that of last month. And on July 8th was this El Mawasi massacre, which was, an operation that also involved the American bridge and the humanitarian bridge, or the corridor that extended into the water. So we know, I'm bringing this to just really emphasize to all of us that our efforts here to stop these bombs have a really, 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 really important impact. And, I think, like, as labor, we've been making steps on this. We're in a period of uptick. I mean, the fight that kind of Carl described of capital defanging labor and stripping it of its ability to influence foreign policy and even just sort of social issues here. Many people on this call have been at the forefront of turning that tide, and we've seen it turned, in fact, culminating with, powerful actions like the unfair labor practice strike at UAW 4811, but also all of the resolution work and all of the solidarity statements and stuff that, in the 2021 Israeli aggression on Gaza was not present. And so I really applaud everybody who's going to take this further towards a total arms embargo of Israel, and continue struggling for labor to assume its role as a bulwark against, like, as Dr. King put it, the triple evils of militarism, racism, and capitalism at home, so that we can have a future with schools that are funded adequately for our children here to learn, and not a future that's filled with schools that are turned into targets for Israeli massacres. I don't want to take too much time. Thank you again for having me, and I look forward to seeing the many ask. I look forward to people continuing to join the movement and strengthening it. And we have as well, if you'd like to stay in touch with us and the Palestinian movement and our efforts around an arms embargo and just general stuff, I think Abdullah will share some of those links in the chat, and you can click on them to find out more about our People's Arms Embargo and the Mask Off Maris campaign. Thank you again for having me tonight.
Fahad, thank you for making that direct connection between labor and the U.S. funded bombs and the shipments and the manufacturing. Somebody was sharing the other day that sometimes it's a gap in knowledge for people to they don't really know the direct connection. And when they hear the direct connection, there is all of a sudden a sense of urgency. And so I just appreciate you making that direct connection on this call. I am honored to introduce our final speaker, last but certainly not least, Alejandra, who is the president of the San Antonio Alliance, who will be talking about work in Texas for ceasefire and the work that's also happening around ending military aid to Israel.
Thank you so much, Lexis. And thank you for all of the work holding it down in Chicago right now. Appreciate everyone who's there working on behalf of Palestinian liberation. I'm Alejandra Lopez, president of the San Antonio Alliance. We are a merged AFT-NEA local in San Antonio, Texas. And so, when Gloria spoke earlier about the states where books are being banned, that is us. Texas, as you all must know, is on the forefront of rising fascism in the state, with a governor that is hell-bent on making this state positively hostile for all working class people of color, for Palestinian Americans, for all marginalized groups. And so that is the water that we swim in here in San Antonio. But despite that, we have been really proud of the work that we've done on this issue in particular. Our local was one of the first in the country to call for a ceasefire in Gaza on October 11th. We had an executive council meeting, and a number of our executive council members are incredibly knowledgeable and passionate and knew where this was heading. We were also one of the first locals in the country to sign on to the UE labor ceasefire call. And so I really want to recognize their leadership in this, because when someone stakes that ground out in the forefront, it becomes much more straightforward for those of us in locals to say, look, this exists and we can sign on to it. After moving it through our own local, we then worked to move it through our Central Labor Council. And again, you know, being able to point to other places in the country, places that were signing on to UFCW and UE's labor ceasefire call, meant that we could really lift up that work. And so our Central Labor Council here in San Antonio in November signed on to that resolution. The violence continued, and so we continued to chart a path forward, and took advantage of the Texas AFL-CIO COPE convention that happened earlier this year in Texas. And so, you know, we couldn't let that opportunity go by, since it was a statewide convention, and worked with a coalition of people throughout the state to put forth a ceasefire resolution on that convention floor. And I will just tell you that that was a really difficult landscape, right? We have unions from all across the state of Texas. We are a big, diverse state. We have, you know, small locals in rural areas, big locals in, you know, urban areas. And so the resolution we put forward did not contain everything that we want as socialists or as people who deeply care about Palestine. But it was a resolution that could be passed through the Texas labor movement at that moment. And it was a call for a ceasefire. It was a call to end occupation and dismantle settlements. And it was a call to prosecute leaders guilty of violations. And so again, you know, it wasn't what I personally would have pushed for, but it was something that could get passed. And it was just a matter of weeks later that the national AFL-CIO called for a ceasefire. So, you know, at every step of this process, this work is only possible because a coalition of socialists and other progressive unionists have worked together. And at times, yes, we have had to compromise. And instead of, you know, having the right position, we've had to come up with something that the largest majority of people could agree on at that time. But that's why this work must continue, right? Because we can't just stake that ground out and then stop. So since then, our local has passed a resolution calling for an end to US military aid to Israel until the Israeli government agrees to a permanent ceasefire. We know at this moment, we now have to move beyond ceasefire statements, because at this point, a majority of US, you know, people support a ceasefire. We have thousands of locals. We have, you know, 9 massive national locals that have put this forward, and the bombs are still continuing to drop, right? So our job now, like y'all all have articulated, is to push the Biden administration and Harris campaign to stop all military aids. But we have to be engaged in mass politics to do that, right? We have to move a majority of union members with us. And that is difficult at this, you know, time, because like everyone has talked about, right, the deep indoctrination that people have experienced. So far in Texas, we haven't yet built that majority support for this stronger position in the way that we were able to for the more straightforward ceasefire position. But our local and other locals across the state are committed to continuing to push workers towards this. And we know we have to both prevent a second Trump presidency and, you know, win down ballot races, especially in a place like Texas where our very lives depend on it. So we're not thrilled about this, but we are following the block and build strategy that does mean working in the immediate term to block that fascist takeover while building the connections, the relationships, and organizing structures so that we can continue to move a majority of union workers to support anti-war, anti-genocide, anti-apartheid positions, and then fight for them all together in coalition. And so all of y'all are a part of this work, and we're you know, fortunate to be alongside y'all.
Alejandra, thank you. I think you actually touched on two major points that are a great way to close before asking people to take some action, which is that everything has to happen in coalition. We talked about it today of, when we first launched Uncommitted and got over 101,000 votes. That's not something we did easily. I mean, there was a team that, like an amazing team we had here, but it was also the coalition of folks on the ground in Michigan that helped support that work. And then it grew to a national movement. And now, we're at the DNC and we're doing all these amazing things, our Not Another Bomb campaign. And I think all these things happen because of coalition building and us working together. And so thanks for emphasizing that point. And there's still a lot of work to be done. We have made a lot of progress. Folks understand and know and feel that it's beyond just asking for a ceasefire and that we're asking to end U.S. weapons aid to Israel. And it's something that's going to take a lot of us, to work simultaneously together. I think the second point that's really important is that, you often hear folks talk about this idea to, call for an arms embargo to save Palestinian lives right now, talking about Palestinian self-determination and freedom, but then also talking about a Trump presidency. And one of the things I've been emphasizing is that both can and have to happen at the same time, that we can fight fascism in November, but we can't do that without also fighting for Palestinian human rights and Palestinian self-determination. And that VP Harris, the Harris-Walz campaign, they all have to listen to this base of anti-war voters that are literally saying that we want an arms embargo, we want a ceasefire right now, we want to save Palestinian lives, and that it's really important to listen to that base ahead of November so that way we can, again, one, save lives right now, but also fight against fascism come November. And so as a way for folks to support this movement, as a way for us to do this together, do this really hard work together, I'm going to put 4 calls to action out there right now. And thank you to Abdullah, who will be dropping some links in the chat. Our first ask is that we are actually mobilizing folks to sign our national petition right now, which is a petition that folks all across the country are signing, asking VP Harris to pledge to enact an arms embargo. We have a goal of getting to 100,000 signatures, ideally by the end of the week. So if folks can take that petition, and if you have not signed it, please sign it. It takes less than a few minutes. But also if you can commit to sharing this link with 10 of your friends to also sign this petition as well. We want to be able to showcase to VP Harris a clear number of folks who are actually supportive of her enacting an arms embargo. Quick data point is over 80% of Democrats are behind a ceasefire, and over 70% are actually behind conditioning aids and weapons and weaponry to Israel. And so this is not an ask that is out of that is not a popular demand. This is things that majority of Democrats want. The second ask is to show solidarity and to strengthen our base within the convention by getting other labor delegates to actually sign our ceasefire delegate letter. And so there's a link that Abdullah will now drop in the chat, which is our ceasefire delegate. This is not for, anybody across the country. This is actually for people who are going to the convention that are Harris delegates that stand in solidarity with the work that Uncommitted is doing with this idea that Palestinians deserve this right to self-determination and freedom. And so if you have not signed the ceasefire delegate letter and you are a delegate coming to the convention, please sign it. And then if you know other labor delegates that are in your network that are Harris delegates and support this movement and this work, please ask them to sign it as well. Third ask is if folks are not at the convention and are just trying to join in any way they can virtually to understand what's happening on the ground and what is the movement that's happening and the momentum, we will have a live from Chicago call that's happening virtually with the Uncommitted team from 4:30 until 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. And so please sign up to join our live action call on Wednesday. And then our final ask is a fundraising ask. So we believe in grassroots fundraising and are going to continue to need to fundraise to sustain our operations here at the convention. And so if folks are able to give to our movement, Abdullah will share our last and final link in the chat, which is our donation link. And if you can also share that to 10 of your friends as well, would greatly appreciate it. But I just appreciate everybody being on this call, all the organizers, the activists, people that are doing work inside the convention, people that are doing work outside the convention, all of the progress that we've made from getting, our administration to even talk about a ceasefire to now putting an arms embargo in the headline and talking about conditioning weapons aid to Israel. These are things that do not happen alone. I believe movement work is exactly what leads to policy change. I think we're in a critical moment right now in a high stakes political landscape where we can't risk losing a single vote. And people are saying that this is an issue that matters to them and they want the party to hear them on this issue. And so I think we have to just continue to push our demands forward, continue to work in solidarity with each other, always have grace, extend, some love. People are experiencing a lot. And as long as we continue to organize with that North Star, then I think we're all doing the right thing. And so just so much gratitude again for everybody on this call. And I think I should pass it back to Ryan maybe to close us out.
Yeah, I'll actually
Yeah,
take it from
Lexus,
here.
I'm going to go to Abdullah to close us out. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Lexus, for being an amazing MC and for giving us so much insight into this amazing campaign. And thank you to all of our speakers for really showing us how labor has been leading so effectively at this moment and kind of in such an unprecedented way. I want to also make an ask for people. If you're not already in DSA and if you are interested in organizing more events like this, organizing more in your local community, to please join DSA and uplift the cause for Palestinian liberation within DSA, because I think it's really important for us as DSA, as people here, to be able to continue organizing, after this call. I also want to give a shout out to the fact that like the way that we're able to get here to this particular moment in labor is because so many of us, especially in DSA, have gotten involved in the labor movement. So many socialists, so many young left-leaning or lefty people have gotten jobs or have gotten involved in the labor movement in some way or another. And I think that's like a really important way that we're going to be able to shift labor in the long run. So the National Labor Commission is also doing a lot to help with that. And so if you're interested in getting involved in that work, join DSA and get involved with the NLC. I think that's the end of our call. I dropped the DSA, join DSA link over there, and I'll pass it to Ryan.
Hopefully everybody can hear me. Yeah, I'm just so inspired by all of our panelists. Abdullah has been really doing just such amazing work as well. We are all in this fight together. I really appreciate everybody's patience in the chat. We do have plenty of asks for everybody, and I am asking folks to go ahead and fill out that sign-in form. And if you have any questions, we weren't able to get to those today. I think we had invaluable information that we heard and asks from our panelists, but please do reach out. Make sure you fill out that Google form and mention any ideas or questions or concerns that you may have. We have a lot of work to do. It's, our work is cut out for us. We're not going to be able to accomplish everything we want at the DNC. We're going to continue pushing forward together and building this movement together. So thank you so much, everybody. Please do join DSA. The link should be in the chat, and we will see you all next time.